She smiled. No one's coming. I whispered back, almost without thinking. Then it's our night. The words slipped out before I could stop them. They weren't meant to sound the way they did. Too soft, too close. But the moment they left my mouth, I knew something had changed. The shop was quieter than usual. Fridays always were. Most people picked up their cars early, and by sundown the garage echoed with only the tick of cooling engines and the low hum of the vending machine by the office door. I was wiping grease off my hands when she appeared. Jacket folded over one arm, keys dangling carelessly between her fingers, like she owned the space more than anyone else. Her name was Clara, mid-40s, sharp, unhurried, with the kind of posture that made you straighten your own without meaning to. She wasn't one of those people who filled silence with chatter. She let it sit, let it stretch until you noticed yourself in it. That night, she leaned against the frame of the office door and tilted her head slightly. You're still here. I shrugged. Boss said I should lock up. No one's coming, she said. Her lips curving in a way that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite serious either. And that's when I answered the way I did, too quickly, too bare. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, like she heard something I didn't mean to say. Then she looked away, scanning the empty lot beyond the glass. The overhead lights buzzed, making the shadows feel heavier, and I suddenly felt how close I was standing. I busied myself stacking tools, but every movement felt exaggerated. My hands weren't steady. The rag slipped twice. She walked in, set her jacket over the chair, and poured herself coffee from the pot I'd forgotten was even brewing. Black, no sugar. She sat, crossed her legs, and didn't say a word. Minutes passed like that, the kind that made you hyper-aware of every sound. The drip of coffee into her cup. The rustle of her sleeve as she adjusted her watch. My boots scuffing against the concrete floor. At some point, she asked, Do you always stay this late? Sometimes. Why? I didn't have a clean answer, so I didn't give one. I just shrugged again, but I knew she noticed how my eyes lingered on her too long before I turned back to the workbench. The thing about Clara was that she didn't press. She could ask one question, leave it there, and make you wrestle with it long after she'd stopped caring. Or at least pretended not to. When she finally stood, her chair scraped against the floor. She walked past me, close enough that I caught a faint trace of her perfume. Something warm, nothing floral. Her hand brushed the edge of the counter, fingertips trailing for half a second longer than necessary. She didn't look at me when she said, Lock up when you're done. And then she was gone, heels clicking against the empty hallway until the door shut behind her. I stood there, rag still in my hand, the silence suddenly louder than any engine I'd ever worked on. I kept telling myself it was nothing. A passing moment, words thrown carelessly into the air. But that night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. I told myself it was nothing, a slip of words, a silence that carried more weight because the shop was too empty, the night too long. But then Saturday came, and Clara showed up again. Not in her usual sharp way. She wore a sweater, hair tied loosely back, and when she walked in, she carried a folder pressed tightly to her chest. Not her normal stride either. More careful. You're early, I said, surprised. She dropped the folder on the counter, let out a breath, and pressed her fingers to her temple. Car's fine. I just didn't feel like being home. Something in the way she said it, flat, but with a crack underneath, kept me from asking anything else. I didn't know much about her personal life, only that she was divorced. People whispered about it, but no one dared bring it up around her. She caught me staring, so I looked down, busying myself with nothing, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. You don't talk much, do you? She said, pulling out a chair. I guess not. Good. She almost smiled. People who talk too much rarely listen. That shut me up even more, though my mind wasn't quiet. I noticed how she rubbed her wrist absent-mindedly, as if something heavy had been there too long. How the sweater sleeve kept slipping down, and she didn't bother to fix it. I noticed the half-moon shadows under her eyes, the way her voice softened when she stopped trying to sound composed. And it felt dangerous, off-limits. Not just because she was older, not just because she was technically my boss's friend and occasionally looked over the accounts, but because the air between us seemed to bend differently, like there was something she wasn't saying, and I was already leaning too close to it. I told myself to keep busy, to not let the silence do what it always did when she was around, stretch until it pulled something out of me. But then she said, almost too casually, "You ever feel like you've wasted years on someone who never really saw you?" I froze. The wrench slipped in my hand, clattering against the floor. She didn't flinch. She just stared at the folder, fingers tracing its edges. I wanted to say something, anything, that I couldn't imagine anyone not seeing her. That every time she walked into the room, it shifted. That she was the kind of person people carried with them even after she left. But I didn't. My throat locked. Instead, I crouched to pick up the wrench, buying time, and when I stood, she was watching me. Really watching. The air grew heavier, pressing in, the hum of the lights suddenly too loud. She reached across the counter, her fingers brushing my arm as she pushed the folder toward me. "Stay a little longer," she said. "I don't want to sit here by myself." Her touch lingered, light, deliberate, and I almost said the thing I shouldn't. I should have left when she asked me to stay. I knew that, but something in her tone made it sound less like a request and more like a truth she couldn't admit out loud. So I stayed. Clara sat at the desk, folder open but untouched. She rested her chin on her hand, staring at the pages without really seeing them. I leaned against the workbench, pretending to organize tools, but I kept glancing at her. "You ever think about just disappearing?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "Like running away?" She gave a short laugh, though it didn't sound amused. "Not running. More like slipping out of your own life, leaving all the noise behind." The words clung to the air, and for a second, she looked smaller, younger, like the weight she carried every day had finally pressed her down. I wanted to ask what happened, what she was running from, but before I could, her hand reached absently toward the coffee mug on the counter. She misjudged the distance, and it tipped. I caught it before it spilled, my hand closing around hers in the process. Warm, steady. Neither of us moved. Her eyes met mine, searching, holding longer than was safe. I should have let go. Instead, I felt my grip tighten, as if some part of me was terrified she'd pull away. The moment stretched, then a sudden shrill sound broke it. Her phone. She flinched, snatching her hand back, fumbling for the device in her bag. "Don't worry about it," she said too quickly. She silenced the call without answering, but her composure was already gone. She smoothed her sweater, tucked her hair behind her ear, but her hands shook slightly. I forced myself to look away, to busy myself with a wrench that didn't need fixing. My chest still burned from that touch, and I hated that the sound of her phone had left me almost relieved, like I needed the world to remind me of boundaries I was too close to forgetting. But then she said quietly, "Sorry." It was him. I didn't need to ask who. The way her mouth tightened told me enough. The ex-husband, the one she'd never named but always seemed to carry in the corners of her silence. "I thought he stopped calling," I muttered. "So did I." Her voice cracked just slightly, then steadied again. "Sometimes I think he just wants to remind me he still can." I turned then, really looking at her, and for the first time I saw the raw edge beneath all her poise. It undid me. "I don't like seeing you like this," I said before I could stop myself. She froze, eyes locking on mine. The garage was too quiet again, except for the faint buzz of the lights. She rose slowly, stepped closer, until the faint warmth of her body reached me. Her lips parted, as if she was about to say something she shouldn't, and I knew so was I. Her nearness made everything else blur. The shadows, the smell of oil and metal, even the faint ringing in my ears. She didn't touch me, but it felt like she had. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. "Like what? Like I'm more than I am." She said it almost sharply, like she regretted it the second it left her mouth. I wanted to deny it, laugh it off, turn back to the safety of silence. But instead, the words tumbled out, "Because you are." The space between us shrank in an instant. Her eyes searched mine, guarded, uncertain, but not pulling away. I could see the fine lines near her temples, the faint smudge of tiredness under her lashes, and all I could think was how alive she looked when she stopped pretending to be untouchable. "You don't know what you're saying," she murmured, though her voice trembled. "Maybe not, but I know how it feels standing here." Her breath hitched. She turned, pacing a short step before bracing both hands on the counter, back to me. "This is insane. I'm twice your age. People would." She cut herself off, shaking her head. "I don't care what people think." The words came out faster than I could stop them. She spun then, eyes flashing, not with anger, but something rawer. "But I do. You think this is simple? You think it's just about wanting or not wanting?" Her voice cracked, and she pressed her fingers to her forehead. "I've already lost too much." The confession hit heavier than I expected. I didn't know the details, only fragments. Divorce, silence in her house, phone calls she ignored but never blocked. Whatever she carried, it was still on her shoulders, and I was only adding weight. I stepped forward, careful, almost slow enough to change my mind. "I don't want to take anything from you." She looked at me then, eyes glassy, a soft fury and grief mixed together. "But you already are." The words gutted me. My chest tightened, and for the first time I wanted to pull back, to escape before I broke something neither of us could repair. I turned toward the door, but her voice stopped me. "Don't." Just that. One word, and my feet rooted to the floor. I turned, and she was closer than before. Close enough that I could see her lips tremble as if she was biting back something reckless. Her hand hovered near my arm, not touching, just there, hesitant, suspended in a choice. "What are we doing?" she whispered. The question hung between us, heavy, unanswered, impossible to escape, and neither of us spoke again. The silence pressed until I thought it would crush me. Her question still hung in the air. "What are we doing?" I didn't have an answer. I was about to say something, anything, when the folder she'd left on the counter slid slightly, pages spilling out. I bent instinctively to gather them, but when I saw what was inside, my breath caught. It wasn't invoices or car records like I expected. It was court papers, custody filings, old letters, and one photo creased at the edges. Clara with a boy, maybe 15, maybe 16. Her arm around his shoulder. His eyes the same shade of hers, but harder, guarded. She reached across the counter and snatched the photo from my hand. Almost too late. Her voice was sharp, but her hands shook. "That's not for you." I froze. You have a son?" Her jaw tightened. "Had." The word hung like a blade. She pressed the photo back into the folder, her movements too deliberate, as if neatness could erase what I'd seen. I tried to steady my voice. "I didn't know. You weren't supposed to." She let out a dry laugh, though it didn't sound like laughter at all. "Everyone thinks he's with his father. Maybe that's easier, cleaner." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, fierce. "But he left. Years ago. Decided I wasn't enough." The crack in her voice made my chest ache. I wanted to reach for her, but something inside me hesitated. The boy in the picture closer to my age than hers. And suddenly the lines blurred, the danger sharper. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked quietly. "Because once you admit you've failed someone that badly, you don't come back from it." Her eyes flicked to mine, and I swore she could see the question burning in me before I even asked it. "What does that make this?" I whispered. Her face softened, just for a moment, as if she hadn't expected me to ask so plainly. Then she looked away, exhaling hard. "A mistake I can't afford. Not again." The words should have cut me off, ended it. But instead, they pulled me closer, because underneath them was something unsaid. If it was truly nothing, she wouldn't still be here, alone with me, letting the silence stretch until our breaths tangled. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "You're not failing me." Her head snapped back toward me, eyes wide. For the first time she looked afraid. Not of me, but of herself. The tension cracked with a sudden knock at the front door. We both flinched, snapping our gazes toward the sound. A figure stood outside, shadowed by the dim lot light. She stiffened, whispering under her breath, "It's him." And in that moment, everything shifted. The knock rattled the quiet more than it should have. Clara froze, one hand pressed to the folder as if she could shield it. Outside, the figure shifted, blurred by the glass. "Don't answer," I said before I could think. Her eyes darted to mine, conflicted, then back to the door. Another knock, louder. "It's him," she whispered again, almost to herself. "He always finds a way back." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Then don't let him in." Her breath came fast, uneven. "You don't understand. He'll keep pushing. He'll—" She cut herself off, shaking her head. "And I can't. I can't go through another scene." Her words carried more weight than I could hold, but I stood there anyway, a barrier she hadn't asked for but didn't push away. The silence stretched, the knock faded into nothing, and eventually the shadow outside drifted into the night. We both stayed rooted in place, listening, waiting. When it was finally clear, Clara let out a long, trembling breath and slumped against the counter. "I'm tired," she admitted, voice breaking. "Tired of pretending I'm fine. Tired of running from mistakes I can't fix." Her hands covered her face. "And now you're standing here, looking at me like I'm something I'm not, and I don't know if I can bear it." The words gutted me, but they also cracked something open. I reached out, hesitant, and touched her wrist, guiding her hands down just enough for her to meet my eyes. "I don't see what you've lost," I said softly. "I see what's still here." Her lips parted, a breath caught between protest and surrender. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just us. The smell of coffee gone cold, the hum of the lights, the faint warmth of her skin under my fingertips. "This is wrong," she whispered, though she didn't pull away. "Then tell me to leave." My voice was steady, though my chest thundered. Her eyes flicked over my face, searching, torn. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then she shook her head, the faintest motion, and I felt the fight drain from her shoulders. "I don't know how to let someone stay," she confessed. "Not anymore." "Then start with me." The words weren't planned, but they landed heavy between us. I didn't move closer, didn't push. I just stood there, hand on her wrist, waiting. Her gaze softened, glassy with something she hadn't let anyone see in years. And for the first time, she didn't hide it. She let me see her, raw, unguarded, terrified. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, full, a space where something unspoken finally had room to breathe. Clara exhaled, shakily, and whispered, "Stay." And that was all it took. I stayed. Not because it was simple, nothing about that night was, but because she asked. And for once, Clara allowed herself to lean on someone, even if just for the span of a few quiet hours. We didn't cross the line people might imagine. There was no rushing, no sudden sweep into something reckless. Instead, we sat side by side at the counter, the folder still between us. She told me pieces of her story in fragments. How her marriage fell apart long before the papers. How her son slipped further away until the silence became permanent. how the phone calls kept dragging her back to wounds she couldn't quite close. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened the way she once said few people ever did. Every now and then her hand brushed mine. Not deliberate, not hesitant either. Just there, reminding me we weren't completely alone. For the first time, Clara's words weren't sharp or measured. They were messy, raw. And I realized the strongest thing about her wasn't the mask she wore, but the way she allowed it to crack when she finally couldn't hold it anymore. By the time the night tilted toward morning, the silence between us felt different. Not heavy, not dangerous, just real. When I stood to leave, she didn't stop me. She only said, softly, "Thank you." I nodded, unsure if I should say more. But then she added, "Don't disappear, all right?" The request landed deeper than she knew. I promised her without words, just a look that lingered, steady enough to carry meaning. Walking out of the shop, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I knew nothing was magically fixed. Her ex would still call. Her son might never come back. The past wouldn't vanish. And me? I was still young, still unsure what came next. But something had shifted. For both of us. She wasn't invisible anymore. And I wasn't standing outside her life, looking in. Maybe that's what mattered most. Not the labels, not the danger, not even the odds stacked against us. Just the simple truth that, for one night, neither of us had to be alone. And that truth, fragile, imperfect, was enough. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?